And we are live, back again, Daru Strong Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Daru. Today I have two special guests with me. We ran through a training session. This guy has known me for about 10, maybe even 11 years. He's known me since I was a fighter, but also did strength sports along the way. Trevor Jaffe is one of the most knowledgeable powerlifting coaches that I've come across. One of the guys that I look at when I want information when it comes down to strength training in general. So we had a good talk there about strength and conditioning, but also power and performance, along with his significant other, Riley, who is also a psychiatrist. So we talk a little bit about the art of coaching and the psychology that goes behind coaching. So talk a lot about that also, and what he's doing now with his mentoring program for strength sport coaches and athletes. So check it out. But before we do that, have to shout out the sponsors, Revive MD. Go check out revivesubs.com. You can go ahead and get my very own athlete stack, Phil Daru Athlete Stack, now available. And you can use my discount code DaruStrong20 at the final discount. You get 20% off there. And the next one, Athletic CBD. CBD has been known to help with soreness, help with recovery. A lot of my fighters, as you know, get kicked and punched on a daily basis. So this definitely helps when it comes down to recovery, getting them feeling better. You can use the discount code DARU at your checkout. You'll get 20% off your final purchase. Okay, also, if you're a coach looking to learn some of my methods, my principles of training, my systems, everything that I've learned over the past 10 plus years of coaching and being an athlete, you can get it now on a portal that is beneficial, not for just you, but for your athletes, and you'll get it for life for a one-time fee. So if you want to learn a little bit more on what I do, you'll get a bi-weekly call. We get on a mentorship call on a Zoom meeting. We have well over 400 coaches from around the world right now, and it's growing each and every day. So check it out. One-time fee. Again, you get access for life if you want to learn all the methods that I use for me and my athletes. Also, I know you guys are at least suffering a little bit from this pandemic. It's a little crazy, getting worse now. Unfortunately, some people are still on lockdown. Some people are starting to get back on lockdown. If you do not have access to a gym, to some exercise equipment, check out my very own, one of my newest programs, Body Armor. It's an 8-week body weight only program that you can get now. Link is in the description. Also, you can get it on darustrong.com. Go check out my website. I have all my programs there. But again, 8-week body weight only program. You could do it at the comfort of your own home without any exercise equipment. You may need a pull-up bar and a band, but at the end of the day, you're going to need something to do some posterior chain work. So make sure you invest in a pull-up bar and a little bit of bands just in case. All right, so that's the program there. And then lastly, if you are off camp and you're a fighter and you're looking to increase your work capacity, increase your strength endurance, increase your aerobic capacity, check out my very own app. Yes, I have an app now from Train Heroic. I know that people have been asking about it, so I decided to go ahead and team up with Train Heroic, and we have an app called Fight Dominance, which is basically an off-camp program dedicated to getting you ready and setting up the prerequisites for your training going ahead inside of camp. So Fight Dominance is now available. You can check it out on my website, darustrong.com. Now let's get into the interview.
Welcome to the Daru Strong Podcast. Daru Strong Podcast.
Let's go. Mind over matter. Put your mind somewhere else and keep going. That little voice in your head is trying to stop you from getting to where you want to be. Be successful and keep moving forward.
With your host and world-renowned strength and conditioning coach, Phil Daru.
All right, guys, so today I have two special guests with me, Trevor and Riley. Now, Trevor, I've known for quite some time now. How long have I known?
About 10 years, man.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
He's known me since I was a pup, since I was probably 175 pounds.
Yep.
Maybe
Fighter foot.
Yeah, so I've made my fluctuations. So have you. We just talked about that.
Absolutely.
I've seen the big 250
Yeah.
come down, what, 198, right?
You know what? Come down as much as 181 for competitions.
Wow, oh, that's right. Fuck, you
198.
talking about me with the fucking baby weight, dog? Come on now.
The only way I'm getting under 200 pounds is with a weight cut.
No, for sure. That's for like 5 seconds, and then you
Yes.
back up.
Yeah,
no, I hear
happy.
you. So, Riley,
Hi.
I've known you for a little bit,
Yeah.
but can you go over your background? Then I'll get to Trevor because, you know, everybody knows.
Yeah. So I'm a powerlifter. I've been powerlifting for about 3 years now. I'm a powerlifting coach. I've been doing that for about 2 years.
Cool.
Before that, I did bodybuilding for like a hot second. Realized that wasn't for me because I enjoy not dieting and I enjoy lifting heavier weight. And before that, I was a volleyball player for about 14 years.
Oh, yeah? How was that transition from volleyball to strength sports?
Different.
Yeah.
So I'd always been in the gym, right? But we'd always been training for like explosiveness, moving, conditioning, fast. You know, like we had to tread water for like 45 minutes in training.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, just because volleyball matches go nonstop, and we would have tournaments where you'd have 6 back-to-back games,
Yeah.
so your conditioning had to be very, very on point.
For sure, yeah.
So switching to bodybuilding, it was weird to be like, oh, I just do 3 sets of 10 reps and that's it.
Totally different.
So it was a weird transition, but it was nice to get back into the gym again. I was like a brief 2 to 3 year hiatus with no gym,
Yeah.
just being an idiot high school kid. And then when I got back into bodybuilding, I was like, I really like this. And
Yeah.
I picked up strength a lot faster than most people. And I had friends that were like, you would be way better at powerlifting than bodybuilding, and you can eat. So I switched to powerlifting.
So what did you do in bodybuilding? Was it physique? Was it physique, fitness?
It would have been figure.
It would have been figure, right? Yeah, because you're tall. Right? That's
Yeah,
perfect.
I wasn't like short and stocky and really big muscle bellies, but just a little bit too big for bikini.
Gotcha.
So figure.
So what's your best lifts right now?
Best in comp, best squat would be 419 in sleeves, best bench is 231, and best deadlift is 480.
And she can roll her ass off. We just found that out. So we just hit a training session, by the way, and every time I have the opportunity to learn from individuals like these two, I make sure that I can do so. Because again, I'm a coach, and we talked about this program for everybody. You coach everybody. Sometimes you just want to be coached yourself.
Yeah, man,
And Trevor actually fixed me up on my bench, which I highly appreciate that, because right now I'm a little deficient in my benching as of right now. You know, guys know I have my ACL tear, but that's not an excuse. There was at one point I was pretty good at benching. Man, you're looking fucking big today.
You know, we just worked out.
Holy fucking hell. What the hell's going on, bro?
It's the rows and a little bit of bloat
Jesus
left over from the
Christ.
California trip this weekend.
Fuck.
I got a few extra pounds on me from this weekend's pizza and
Yeah, bro.
In-N-Out
Jesus
burger.
Christ. All right. It's not that bad because I'm only like 195 pounds right now, so.
I was 212.4 this morning, something like that, which is about 5 too much.
Yeah.
You should cool up. Or was that before we left?
That was before we left, yeah. So I'm up a little bit. A little
Gotcha.
more than I should be.
Well, Trevor, so the people that don't know who you are,
Yeah.
let's go into
That's
the
everybody.
background, the background of it.
Oh man, I have been a competitive strength athlete going on 15 years now. Started off as that shy kid who took the weights because he wanted to build confidence. You know, and you start off with like everybody else does. You pick up your Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding and do 32 sets of chest and hope that you look like Schwarzenegger in 3 weeks, and it doesn't quite happen.
Yeah.
And I veered more towards the strength side, and it took me a while to compete because I was actually too scared to compete. I didn't want to put a singlet on. I was really shy and insecure.
Really?
And strength just built that confidence. And you were talking about it with me when we were working out, that I've had a litany of injuries along the way, which, you know, every athlete's going to have some injuries along the way. You know, some major, some minor. But I don't view them as setbacks. I view them as opportunities to learn, because every time I've had a setback or an injury, if you want to call it that, it was great at expanding my horizons, learning more. Like you said, coaches get coaching, and it's an opportunity for me to help more people. So I'm more known for my coaching than my lifting, even though I'm a pretty high level powerlifter.
Yeah.
As far as competitiveness, like I'm ranked like 6th all time right now in 198 open deadlift. I'm like the only guy over 40 there, 41. Everybody else on that list is like 24, 25. It's kind of cool to keep up with the kids, and that's from what I've learned. But my coaching history, I've had some of the top athletes in the sport. You know, I've coached 4 different all-time world record athletes, which means across all different federations they've achieved an all-time world record, which is kind of unheard of. There's like maybe 2 or 3 other coaches who can say that in this sport. Like you said, I've known you for 11, 12 years. When I first met Phil, I was actually competing more in strongman than anything else. And just kind of destroyed my body along the way. I've done strongman, I've done weightlifting, and I primarily focus on powerlifting now. And obviously I'm known for my deadlift. You know, my best deadlift in comp is 804, which is pretty ridiculous for somebody who weighed in at 195.
It's like okay.
With a fucking hook grip too. That's just crazy.
Yeah, you know, so people always ask me about that. I hook grip before hook grip was cool.
Yeah.
I've been hook gripping for almost 9 years now, and I actually learned it doing weightlifting. And I have to, because I have some pretty severe disc pathology. And whenever I mix grip a deadlift over 600 pounds, I started to get some numbness and tingling down my left leg from the torsion it creates in the pelvis.
Yeah.
So I started hook gripping as a necessity, and there was only like 2 or 3 guys back then who would do that, like Steve Goggins, who's a world-renowned powerlifter. So now it's kind of commonplace because people realize, hey, I can get into a much better position. Helicopter the bar if I hook grip, and my thumbs are always attractively black and blue here. You probably won't see it on camera, but they're not pretty. I'm no hand model.
Yeah, like how can someone start doing that, like as far as hook grip goes? Because I know, man, I got stubby thumbs, man. That shit is not happening for me. Like, honestly, I don't know how you guys do it.
It's a tolerance. Yeah, it's a tolerance factor.
So don't be a pussy.
Yeah.
That's basically what he's telling me.
Yeah, you know what? You're a boxer, you're going to get punched in the face, and the best way to get used to getting punched in the face is put your hands down and let people hit you and build up a tolerance to it. So hook grip is kind of the same way. You just got to take the pain for a while, toughen your skin up, let them get calloused. It's not fun or exciting, but you know, I learned that out of necessity. If I wanted to keep doing what I was doing, I had to find a way, and that was my way.
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot with like dysfunction, asymmetries, when people do that internal, external rotation of the shoulder, trying to get into that deadlift position. I think that is something that, one, is going to mitigate the risk or cause of injury down the line, but also it's more efficient because I feel like that bar path, it just flows for you. Like honestly, like when you watch his deadlift, go to his Instagram, by the way. I'll put the link in the description. You guys can check him out. I was there when he first hit 700.
Yeah. And when I stopped passing out and managed to stay awake for it.
Yeah. I've done my fair share too. You can find that on Instagram. But yeah, I mean, it just kind of flowed up. Like it wasn't even. There was no jarring. I mean, you can anyways, but it just a smooth bar path, you know. And I think that's something that when you're talking about efficiency, it helps you along the way, especially if you're trying to put up big numbers like you are.
Yeah, that's what I became most known for, was really striving for efficiency of movement.
Yeah.
Because powerlifting used to come from a grip and rip style, lift by any means necessary, and I'm kind of the antithesis of that, where I really like people to become very efficient with movement, have a better ability, create a better position. I'm known for the saying position before power, because in the long run you're going to build a bigger total that way when you have more sound mechanics in ideal positions. And I don't want to say you're going to reduce your chances of injury, because anytime you're testing yourself, that chance is always there. And that has more to do with fatigue management than it does with technique we're learning now. But just it's going to allow for a bigger lift overall eventually when you have better positions, and then you add muscle on top of that and build back up. You know, like you said, you were there for my first 700, which was about, I think, 6 years ago. It took me 6 years to go from 700 to 800. You know, only 100-pound difference, but that took 6 years.
Yeah, but honestly, that's a big difference. From 7 to 800.
Yeah, going from 400 to 500 is something you probably do in like 3 months.
Yeah.
Going from 500 to 600 might take you a year and a half if you're lifting consistently. Going from 6 to 7 took me 3 years, and going from 7 to 8 took 6.
Now explain that a little bit more, because when you're talking about powerlifting and getting strong, like strength athletes, the goal is to get your total higher or get that lift higher. How much harder is it? How much more, efficient do you have to be when you get to that level where, okay, now every little inch counts?
Everything matters.
Yeah.
You get away with a lot more in the beginning of your career because you're experiencing newbie gains, neurological patterning happens much quicker, you're adding muscle as you're going. As you advance in powerlifting, it becomes so much more about the exercise selection and programming, and especially fatigue management, which we were talking about when we were working out today. You know, I gave my control of my programming to somebody else, and the first thing he did was half my volume. Like, you're at this end of the bell curve, you don't need to do this much work anymore. If you want to recover because of your strength level, you need to half that. Which was a hard pill to swallow because it got me to 800 in the first place. And it's like, man, he's so right though, because if I want to go from 800 to 822, which is my next goal, or 828, I'm gonna have to do things differently. What got me there isn't what's going to keep me there. I have to make a change, and it meant giving up control to somebody else and letting them look at me objectively and say, okay, where is he falling apart? He's falling apart in recovery. Technique is sound. Habits outside of the gym, my nutrition's great. We get 8 hours of sleep every night. You know, I'm not the best sleeper, but we have time for 8 hours of sleep every night.
For sure.
I have daily habits as far as mobility and movement and stability that I do every single morning, which I know you want to talk about. So it was looking at what element needs to change for me to progress further, and it was the amount of work I was actually doing. Because my work ethic is so strong, I will literally go into the gym for 3 hours if I need to, if that's what's on the paper, because I'm going to get everything done I'm supposed to. The problem was I was thinking I was supposed to do all this because that's what got me there. And I needed somebody else with a high level to say, hey, that's not going to keep you there. It's going to break you down eventually because, one, you're old. Sorry, that's true. I'm 41 in my sport, I'm a dinosaur. It's like, but two, you already have a lot of compensation patterns from some of the injuries you have, so let's mitigate that with making sure you have better recovery, which is sound.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing with any sport, really. You look at my MMA guys and my boxers, and with them, they're so efficient now that with their sport, it's now understanding. And once I get them to understand how to lift properly, right, under load, then I can go ahead and start to taper down on things that need be, so that fatigue management is being looked upon because of the fact that they're doing so many other things, right? They're not just training in the weight room. Now, with the injuries, let's talk a little bit about that, because you had the opportunity to kind of take those injuries, like you said, and learn from those. And I've done things, I've learned a lot over the years. I've learned a lot from you, from Tony. Oh, by the way, check out Tony Montgomery. If you haven't checked out that podcast, shameless plug.
We have Coach's Corner on the platform.
Yep. So check them out. They both got a podcast. Our episode was like episode number 2 or 3. Tony was one of my first strength coaches, and this man right here works hand in hand with him. But so let's talk a little bit about that. So learning how to overcome those obstacles and then taking that as an opportunity to learn more.
Right, and that was a really bitter pill to swallow. I refused it. I spit it out, actually. I'll tell you that story. I sat in the hospital. Father's Day weekend, I was young and ambitious, and I was still competing in strongman, and I decided I was going to do a strongman competition one weekend, and the very following weekend I was going to do a powerlifting competition. So they're similar sports, but different training aspects. Yeah. And of course, I was following a conjugate program back then, so what was supposed to be dynamic effort and max effort became max effort every week on both. And so my body broke down, I couldn't walk, I couldn't sleep, and I ended up in the hospital, and about 11:30 at night, 2 days before Father's Day, the neurosurgeon comes into my room and says, well, you're done lifting heavy, you're going to have to take up jogging if you want to do exercise, and you need surgery. And of course, when you've been waiting all day to hear this neurosurgeon give you the news that you don't want to hear, you kind of freak out. And I cursed him out and told him he was wrong. And this is how old I am. I had like the first generation Droid phone at that time, which had the internet, which was so cool. You guys are growing up in this pattern, because that was new to me. I was like, wow, I had this device in my hand that allows me to do research. So from my hospital bed, I was researching disc pathology and low back rehab, and I learned about Stu McGill before anybody knew who he was. Some old YouTube videos with him sitting over the spine, discussing disc pathology, and I learned about, the big 3, bird dogs, core bracing, creating trunk stiffness. I learned about the McKenzie method, which is what a lot of people used to use from like the National Academy of Sports Medicine. That was a drawing in maneuver, and he was counteractive to the drawing in maneuver. He talked about pushing the TVA out to create stability. So it was right then and there was an opportunity for me to learn. And I had set a goal in the hospital that I was going to compete within 6 months of being in the hospital without surgery, which is wild and crazy, but that's what young men do. And I did, and it was one of my worst meets ever, but I was there and I was just happy to be there. I pulled like a 550 conventional deadlift. I was just starting to teach myself sumo. That 550 was like the most significant to me, because here's this guy with a PhD telling me I'm not ever gonna lift again, and I need to have my back fused, and I refused to listen. So that was my opportunity to learn. And that's kind of how my coaching really grew and started, because I came back from this horrific injury that everyone saw, like my left leg wasn't working at all. Rehabbed myself to a point where I was now squatting again and deadlifting again, and people are like, well, how'd you do that? So as injuries become common in our sport, like I talked about, people begin to reach out to you and say, hey, can you help me through this? I know you've done it. And so word of mouth grew, and so I had that low back injury. I actually had it the first week before my first strongman contest too in 2005, and I competed anyways because that's what you do. We're a little tougher in our sport than we should be. But it's always an opportunity to learn. It's a painful opportunity, but those painful lessons are ones that you'll remember forever. So I started with that. And then recently as last year, August, I blew out my left adductor magnus taking my last heavy squat before meet. 2 weeks before my meet, it was my last heavy squat, 705 on the bar, and on the way down I felt something pull, so I decided I was going to reverse position. And as I did that, my entire left leg gave out and the adductor magnus tore off, and that took a little while to come back. But from that, I just recently competed, and I still squat around 600 pounds in sleeves. I haven't tried wraps yet, but we're still working our way back. But the deadlift was able to come back and hit 804. And so I was pretty proud about that.
This was at Treasure Coast, wasn't it? That
was at Treasure Coast. I just moved, and 2 days later I was in the gym trying to take my heavy squat. And stress, we talk about stress management. Stress was really high. I just separated from a relationship. I moved away from my family a little bit, and was getting ready for this meet, which was the wrong timing. There's a recurring theme here. But right away, it was like the universe giving me a chance to slow down. There's more for you to learn, there's more people for you to help, and this is how you're going to do it. And instantly, right then and there, it was like, okay, that's just what it's going to be. I'm going to learn from it. And now, so when people ask me what books should I read or who I should follow, my recommendation is always look outside your sport. What are other athletes doing? What are MMA strength conditioning coaches? What are football athletes? What are field course specialists? Because they're working with athletes of various levels and degrees. We already know how to squat, bench, and deadlift, and we can teach people to do that more efficiently. But how do you manage an athlete as a whole? And that comes from periodization and programming, and then also, like Riley's great with this from the psychology, the mental aspect of buy-in.
100%.
And creating those good habits and that good culture of strength, because most people just think you just show up and lift. That's the fun part. That's the easy part. To get to the next level, you have to do all the hard work.
You know what's so funny is that, I work with fighters, and like I said, that's not their sport to lift weights, but learning from guys like yourself, guys that, know how to lift weights. When I started with Matt Levine back then, like I thought I knew how to lift weights, and then I found out from a guy that does this, and you and Tony and all those guys that actually are lifters and do it for competition. I started to be a better coach that way.
Yep.
So another way I can put them underneath a good or in a good position underneath the bar so that they can be efficient there and get the stimulus that we want. Obviously, I don't care where their max is on a competition style squat, right? But I do want to make sure I'm getting that strength stimulus.
Yep.
So if I can put them in the best position, that's the point, right? So that's why I get what you're saying when it comes down to taking things from all other genres of training. Now, Miss Riley, let's talk a little bit about psychology. Okay, so go a little bit in your background with psychology now.
So I have a degree in psychology. It's cognitive neuroscience, which is just really fancy for studying the brain. Nothing super major. I didn't have any specific concentration like a lot of people will do mental illnesses or they'll do like childhood development. I kind of wanted to learn it all because it's all important. So that really helps me with coaching because I can understand how to talk to an athlete, and everyone communicates so differently. So you have to be adaptive when communicating with an athlete. And some people want that direct, really blunt response of "this sucks, make it better." And some people you need we call it a compliment sandwich, where you give them something that they're doing good, the thing that they need to work on, and then another good thing to finish it out. So the psychology of it is probably more important than people give it credit for. We talked about like how hard it is to progress.
Sure.
And with powerlifters, a lot of them want to just brute force their way through, and they don't understand that it gets to a point where you're fighting tooth and nail for 3 pounds on one lift for 3 years. So they don't want to take the time to slow down, think about the longevity. So it's our job as a coach to kind of get them to think about, okay, this is what you're doing now. And all the stuff that you're working on is helping. It just may take 6 months to a year for it to come into effect. So being adaptive with communicating is probably the biggest challenge that most coaches have. And I've had lifters come to me and say, my last coach didn't communicate with me at all. I didn't get feedback for 6 months. They didn't tell me anything. So then that's my job to make them go all in, buy into the process.
Do you feel it's harder to do that? Because you guys do a lot of online coaching, right? I feel like that's super hard for me. Even though I still have some clients that I do remote coaching for, and these are high level guys and girls, I still find it very difficult because I like to be there with them.
I love the in-person aspect.
Yeah.
I do miss that sometimes.
Yeah, I mean,
tactile cueing is hard when you're.
That's what I'm saying. So how do you monitor that? How do you do that when it's online like that?
We do a lot of videos, and Trevor is better about like videos than I am. But we'll actually demo on each other. So like if there's a lifter having a problem with something, instead of just trying to type it out and say like this is what you should be feeling, he'll record a video of me doing a movement and say like this is what this should look like, and then you kind of just have to ask them for as much detail as they're willing to give. The more detail, the better. You will get some very neurotic clients that will tell you everything, but those clients tend to progress a little bit better because they're telling you absolutely everything. So it's covering not only the physical as like sending a video, you're typing it out in a way that they can relate it to. Like if someone tells you someone's sitting back too far in a squat and you tell them sit down like you're sitting on a toilet, everyone knows how to sit down on a toilet. So it's just trying to make a way for it to make sense or for it to like click in their brain.
Sure. Yeah, you're reframing it. Yeah. So I would say, for me, it also depends on the individual too, right? So like if I have a guy, and a lot of my fighters are dopamine driven, so they just like to get after it, and they don't even care what the rhyme or reason. Some of them will, because they're maybe a little bit more acetylcholine dominant, like they're more of, they want to know exactly what they're doing, but also they're aggressive. Right, so when I find that, then I have the opportunity to coach them up, but also, rah a little bit when I need to. When you have those types of athletes and clients, how are you able to kind of coordinate their training, even if they don't want to tell you everything, because they just want to train? You ever get that?
Of course, you have some athletes who are very poor with communication. Sometimes you have to pull it out of them.
Yeah.
Because eventually they're going to run into a bad session. Every athlete runs into a bad training session, a bad sparring session, bad lifting session, whatever. They run into it. The first thing to do is, I don't know why today was bad. And that's when you get the chance to open up communication. Okay, what were your daily habits? What's your nutrition like today? What's your hydration like today? Most importantly, how's your sleep been all week? Have you had any extra stress this week? So you can get them to realize that they didn't have a bad day they had a fatigue day. Because fatigue will mask your strength and fitness level. You know, if you're overwhelmed and you're tired, and that's where a good chance to explain to them, your body doesn't know the difference between good and bad stress. It only knows stress. And everything we do to our body, training as well, is a stressor. And that's where we have to mitigate and manage that. And that's where you can start getting and diving in as the online coach and explain to the athlete why these things are important. Because like you said, when you come up in high school football kind of thing or high school basketball, it's go, 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 go. It's a little different when you're achieving at a higher level of sport. Things get a lot more specific. And for those athletes who want to get to the highest level, you have to get them to buy into those specifics. You have to get them to understand that. So eventually, when they run into that wall, they're going to start asking you why. And that's your chance to open up and explain the how and the why.
Definitely get the ones that are higher level, the more experienced athletes. They're more analytical. Maureen, as you guys met her, the first thing she probably asked me 10 to 20 different questions in the first warm up.
She told me that.
Yeah, right. So I mean, you know, and I like that though. And again, like you said, the more questions they ask, the better they'll have as far as, you know, performance wise. So now, when you're assessing an athlete, right, and we're talking about from a psychology perspective, what are you looking for? Like, what are the main things that you're actually asking that individual?
Well, I have a basic questionnaire. Mine and his are pretty similar. You know, I ask like age, so that way I know how to program training for them, because someone who's older generally takes less volume.
No joke. No joke.
I ask basic questions like that. You know, like, what are things that you liked about past coaches? That way I know, you know, like what their common triggers are, what they do or don't like. What types of programs they've ran, what injuries they have. What equipment they have access to. It's like an extensive 12 to 13 question list, but I'm really not looking at the answers. I'm looking at how long they took to answer everything. That's my first indication when I get a client. If everything is 1 or 2 like words long, I know that they're probably not going to communicate with me as well as I would like them to. So then if I have to send a follow-up email that's like, okay, can you elaborate on this, this, and this? I'm going to be a little bit hesitant about taking them on, just because I need that communication. Like you mentioned with remote, it's much harder to get that, or like much harder to work with them if you don't know what's going on. And then, like Trevor said, they'll get to a point where they're hitting a plateau and they're like, I don't understand what's going on. And then you have to ask them about nutrition, about sleep, and they're like, oh, you're right, I haven't eaten more than 1,000 calories in 3 days and I sleep 4 hours. And you're like, okay, so it's not your training that's bad, it's your outside habits.
Do you get some people that are like that, like are saying they're doing everything right and that you know they're not doing everything
right? I think we just mentioned it down there when we asked about daily homework, and they're like, oh, I didn't do my daily homework. Like,
for sure. I was hoping everybody would agree with me on that. So all right. So now, Trevor, you have a very in-depth look at programming, right? You've been working with athletes for a long time now.
Since 2001.
Damn.
In person and remote.
I'm going to age you real quick.
That's another old
I was 10 years old or something like that.
Back in my day.
But all right, so let's get into it. So when you first start off with an athlete, you were primarily strength athletes. What are you looking for to start them off? And let's say they're a beginner lifter. What's the main things that you're trying to accomplish with the programming at that point?
Skill specifics.
Gotcha.
So if they're beginning lifting, let's take, for example, they come into powerlifting. The first thing I want to do is work on their mechanics of the competition lifts. Generally, I don't want them going super duper heavy yet. I want to increase the frequency, because they have to take on and learn the motor patterns of how we want to lift. So I'm trying to work on their movement efficiency first, and allowing that to also serve as a GPP phase of work capacity. So usually it's a little bit higher volume, not necessarily heavy loads, but a higher frequency and a higher volume of lifts. So what I mean by that is, you know, instead of doing like 3 times 10 like a bodybuilder, I might reverse it to 10 sets of 3. So they're getting 10 first reps in there, because that's the one that counts in the powerlifting world. And I can really start seeing that break down over 10 sets, because I don't need to see set 6, 7, 8. What I want to see is the first set and the last set, and start noticing where the breakdown happens in the movement.
Gotcha.
And then start selecting exercises around that. So you're assessing them in the first block, seeing how their movement quality is, seeing what things break down, so you can start for the second block picking selective exercises that are going to help them, you know, secondary movements. You might notice movement mechanic issues, and then that's one of the reasons why I actually started with the videos. Nobody was doing the videos like this at the time. Whenever I had an athlete that had an issue, I would then turn around and film a correction for them and say, hey, I want you to work on this, because I am remote, I'm not there with them. So I take 2 or 3 minutes to film the correction, that what they're doing, how I want to see it, and then I would send it to them. And it became a recurring thing where I'm like, man, I keep having to film these same videos. I just started posting them online and saying, hey, save this, share this, whatever. And they're not like production quality videos where I'm sitting there with like a YouTube camera and editing, and half of them I'm in my underwear, because if you're not from Florida, you don't understand how hot and humid it is here. So
man, this motherfucker's always in his underwear. Bro. It could be 50 degrees out.
Some of them are like mid-set. I'm filming this for an athlete. It's 110 degrees in the garage. I'm training in, and I'm caffeinated as hell. So
I'll be mid-set. And he's like, "Can we record something?
Can we record
something? Finish the set?"
So I just started posting them out there, and it's helped a lot of people. And there's literally like 200 videos over 3 years of helpful corrections, cues to help people. It became easier for me to do my job because I save them all. And then as I take on a new athlete, I can say, hey, here's the problem you're having. I want you to start working on addressing this. But that first phase is always movement efficiency, skill practice. And then usually you're going to decide, okay, do I need them to have more muscle mass? Maybe it's a longer term development, so maybe I'm doing more of a bodybuilding approach. Or is it maybe they may have come over from another sport. I have a lot of people who come from bodybuilding or come from football. So they already have a significant amount of muscle mass. It's just teaching them skill specific. So maybe we're going to something that's mechanically similar and just having them learn how to control it. So tempo work or pause work. If it's a beginner, it's probably not tempo and pause because I haven't even learned the main movement yet. It's just a lot of volume at the main lifts to teach it and learn it and work on those deficiencies. So it can vary. Programming-wise, I tend to stick to what I call accelerated block training. For those unfamiliar with block training, it comes from Vladimir Shurin's book, Block Periodization. And back then it was like an accumulation phase, which is like fatigue phase, where you're actually trying to overwork on purpose before you taper back. And then like a transmutation phase, which was like start to develop specific skills, and then a peaking phase where you're getting ready for the competition. We bastardized that a little bit in powerlifting with a hypertrophy block, which just means you're training for size, a strength block, which means you're training in a rep range that's ideal for strength, and then a peaking block is the same. You're reducing fatigue and minimizing before you go into the competition. Now his work was based off track and field athletes who had to do, like MMA fighters, multiple conditioning aspects plus the sport itself. So the sport often acted as their skill training, and then the conditioning aspect, whether it was either strength or endurance, was something they had to equate to. So they would be written into macro cycles, which might be anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 week blocks, or in some cases they had a whole thing where it might be a 6-week program or period, when they were getting ready for the world championships and then their off season. We can do that a little faster in powerlifting because most powerlifters are generally lazy, which is why we compete in a sport that gives us 1 rep. So they don't have anything else going on as much in life. So I can accelerate those blocks, or I might just do 2 weeks of hypertrophy, 1 week or 2 weeks of strength, and then 1 week of peaking and then deload. And they're not peaking for me, they're just touching top end weights. Most of my lifters are in that linear progression, and it might change a little bit. So let's say off season it might be 2 weeks of hypertrophy, 2 weeks of strength, 1 week peak, deload. As it gets closer to a meet, it might be 1 week of hypertrophy, 3 weeks of strength, 1 week peak, deload. Let's say we're actually in the peaking phase, then it's just going to be 1 week of strength, 3 weeks peaking, deload, and you're actually in the meet. So I can change it on a week-to-week basis. It allows me fast access to manipulate the macro cycle for them and the weekly microcycles to what's needed most. So if they need size, we spend a little bit more time in hypertrophy, but not long periods, because we have a short attention span nowadays. And most people don't want to do 6 weeks of 10 reps. Like, it's pretty boring. It's effective, but when you have a sport where you're dealing with 21, 22, 23-year-olds, I'm the rarity at 41, you don't have a lot of people who want to dedicate 6 to 7 weeks of 5 sets of 10 on the same movement week in and week out. So it allows me to give a lot of variability. Riley's a little bit more fond of like a mix of linear and conjugate. She's known, she came up in a conjugate system, which adds a little bit more variety and excitement to the program, and she can explain that.
Yeah, but I don't think everyone earns conjugate.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's
you have to earn your conjugate.
That's the thing, right? So if you're a lifter whose bench press is 135 pounds and you want to do speed work, 40 to 60% is going to be, it could potentially be an empty barbell. I'm not going to put bands on an empty barbell. So for a beginner, I'll give something more linear to where they're just progressing each week up to a certain point, and then I deload them.
For sure.
I do like variation of secondary movements. So with a beginner, their first movement will be the comp lift, whether that's like a regular squat, bench, or a deadlift. Their secondary movement may focus on something that I know that they're not good at. So in the bench press, I know if they have a terrible lockout, they're gonna get like a Spoto press or maybe a pin, like a high pin press, Anderson press, something like that. But their second movement is a variation. So that's where I like the conjugate, because that's all that conjugate means, is just
concurrent
together. So I don't give conjugate to beginners. I don't want to see what I see on Instagram all the time, which is someone throwing on an unnecessary amount of band tension and 12 chains and nothing on the barbell. Like that doesn't help anyone. You just maybe look cool on the internet, but like Trevor says, no one's handing out cool
chains hanging from the bar off the floor.
You don't get ranked for your internet lifts.
That definitely makes sense. Like I know a lot of people see is what I do with condensed conjugate with the fighters. Now, I don't allow them to just jump right into that, right? Obviously, they have to develop a base of strength.
Right.
And then from there, then we can kind of play around with it. But I still only use about 4 main lifts primarily because they still need to perfect that movement pattern in order for us to get a proper strength stimulus without putting them at risk of injury.
Right.
So all right, so now with the progressions, we're talking about somebody who's a competitive lifter now, somebody like myself, right? Let's say I've been lifting for 15 years, right? But I've been really learning and knowing how to lift properly from a powerlifting standpoint for about 8 years. Where would you start me out at this point in time?
Well, let's say you've been training more conditioning aspect and stuff like that. We already know you have a base conditioning, so we probably jump closer to that strength phase right off the bat and reestablish you getting into the rep range of like 4 to 6 reps, handling heavier loads because you're already conditioned coming in. So we see that. So we transition from the strength phase first and see, okay, where you're at with the strength phase. We don't need a peaking phase because you're not getting ready for meet, but we need to reestablish strength. Yep. So I probably start with 3 to 4 weeks of strength work, drop down that deload, assess from there, see what's broken down, what do we need to build upon. You're already conditioned, so that's going to maintain through that strength phase. We don't need to do that, but I do like to drop into 1 week of hypertrophy again because coming out of a deload, most people feel stiff and sore because they haven't moved as much, the volume is half. So maybe I like to do that 1 week of hypertrophy work or a little bit higher reps, maintain your conditioning, and then go back to that strength block again. And at the end of that second cycle, probably touch a peaking phase a little bit of 1 to 2 weeks of heavy load, see what breaks down to the heavy load, and then program from there.
Yeah, so basically you're spending those 2 weeks as testing.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, we should always be assessing. We should be assessing movement, we should be assessing recovery, we should be assessing habits of the lifter, behavior. Like Riley talked about at the beginning, you know, getting to know what their triggers are. Because some people need a little bit more coddling as far as compliments, and some people just need a hard nose, like, dude, you're screwing up, get your shit together.
Yeah.
So it's always a matter of assessing the lifter.
Yeah.
You can have principles of things that are going to work for generally 80% of lifters, and sometimes you have 20% variability where people either are an outlier and they're going to respond to certain stimulus, or people who are non-responders and you have to change things. Like I have one guy who does not respond to volume very well at all. Yeah. So I have him more on a daily undulating periodization where basically I have him doing a heavy lift 1 week and a light lift the next, and the light lift is like half the volume. Not only half the volume, but low volume. Like 3 sets of 5 at like 65%. Like basically what a deload would be for most people is his light week. Yep. And the next week I have working in a rep range that's like an RPE of 8 or 9, touching heavy weights for 2 or 3 reps and then moving on. You know, he just doesn't handle volume very well. He has a high stress job, a high life. He's got a brand new baby. These are things that affect his recovery. Sure. So I just have him basically touching heavy weight, touching light weight, touching heavy weight, touching light weight, and it's been progressing from there very well for him. So you're going to find that some people are going to be individualized, and that's what individualized coaching should be. Is building out the program to the athlete, not to your principles per se, because those principles are going to work with the majority of people, but not everybody.
Yeah, that goes with understanding the athlete, and that's where some people kind of just get a cookie cutter program, kind of throw it out there, and let everything kind of blanket over. Whereas you have to know the athlete in general so that you can specifically put the pieces in order for them to be successful.
And that's where online comes in, is that communication. Like I have the same formula that Riley has with that questionnaire. If you're giving me 1 word or 1 sentence answers, I'm like, hey, I'm not the coach for you. Yeah. Because you're not going to communicate your needs to me, and I'm not going to be able to help you to the best of my abilities. Yeah,
that's something that like a lot of coaches got to understand, because a lot of them are hungry. They want to coach as many athletes as they possibly can, but that athlete may not be for you.
No, and it's going to make you look bad if they're not helping you help them.
Yep.
Because then they're going to go around and complain to 10 people like, I got nowhere under their coaching.
Exactly.
No, it's your fault for taking them on in the first place. You knew they couldn't communicate with you.
Yep, no doubt. All right, so what do you have coming up now? I know you got the podcast. We have the online coaching, right? And then what else?
I have seminars, everywhere. Greg Panora, who's a Westside barbell lifter, and I have seminars coming up together. We had this idea that we'd do some co-seminars because he was a multiply lifter and a raw lifter and a world record holder. And we wanted to learn from each other, and so we decided we would put some seminars on, hoping it would go somewhere warm. And of course, everywhere we're going is wintertime and cold. Yeah. So I'll be in Michigan, I'll be in Missouri, I'll be in New York. December 11th, I'll be at Granite Barbell in New York with Greg. Tony Montgomery and I have some seminars together. We'll be in Dallas the 23rd, January 23rd? Yeah. January 23rd or 25th, I don't remember the exact date. We'll be at Hidden Barbell in Dallas doing a Coach's Corner seminar. Oh, yeah. We have another seminar April 3rd in Southside Strength Conditioning in Tennessee. Okay. We're working on a website that deals with coaching development, so basically a mentorship for coaches on how to coach for powerlifting, and we have people coming in for different strength sports like Olympic weightlifting and strongman to deliver modules on how they program their strongman athletes. That's going to take some time to develop, but that's something Tony and I are working on with Riley and with Paul Lanede, who's another strength coach. And we all have interesting backgrounds. Riley with the psychology, I mostly work with strength athletes. Tony has done bodybuilding, powerlifting. I think he did 1 random CrossFit contest. Strongman forever. And he works with a lot of nutrition clients and health perspective, and he's getting his master's in exercise science. And then Paul Anita already has his master's in exercise science. He's worked with physical therapy, rehab, athlete and team management through Tampa.
Nice.
He does nutrition.
He does nutrition as well. So it's like a whole resource for coaching. Everything you can possibly need to coach and understand as far as strength sports.
Yeah.
You'll be able to go on that website and learn as a membership and have access to all these educational materials from anatomy, biomechanics, exercise library, correctives, warm-ups, the whole nine.
Nice.
Something we're working on putting together.
Yeah, I have to check that out. We'll hook up. Don't worry.
Get going.
Riley, you got anything, competitions coming up or what?
I probably won't compete until July. I think is the time range I'm looking at. He competes in February. I go with to all the seminars because I'm the brains. So
Correct.
I keep everything in line and whatnot. So I have all the schedules and that. So I think the next place, I know that we're in like Fort Lauderdale the beginning of December.
December 5th in Fort Lauderdale to coach at a meet. I mean, she has athletes in the meet. I have athletes in the meet.
Okay.
And then it's New York. And then January, I think, is the next one after that.
So it's safe to say COVID is not slowing you guys down.
It did for like a solid 6 months, which is why they're all jammed together now.
So combine them now.
I have to be, before I compete, I'll be in 10 different cities, including 2 weeks before I compete. I'll be, I think, in Missouri or Iowa.
Yeah, I think it's
Iowa,
Missouri 2 weeks before the meet.
So 10 trips before I compete. I compete in 15 weeks. It's a pretty busy schedule.
Cool. All right. Well, go ahead. Let them know where they can find you. Instagram. You don't got a Twitter, do you?
I think I do. I just don't even know how to use it.
Yeah. Nobody uses it.
Don't give this man a Twitter.
Yeah. For real. Let's not do
Twitter,
this.
I don't think I've touched it in like 10, 11 years. When social media first came out, my sister's like, you gotta get on there. So I created accounts to all these things. Like I have a LinkedIn I don't think I've touched in like 10 years.
Yeah.
I have a Twitter I don't think I've touched in 10 years. I mostly just deal through Instagram. So I like to filter my athletes to one location.
Yeah.
It makes it easy and accepts everybody so it doesn't matter what they record with.
Gotcha.
Instagram is at Jaffe Strength. That's Jaffe. I'm sure Phil's gonna list in the show notes below. Jaffe Strength.
Mine's at Riley Presnell. Trevor has Coach's Corner Beyond the Platform podcast. Trevor and I have a podcast called The Successory Show.
Which is more like personal development and habit based.
Nice.
Yeah, more coaching
I'll
and
check
stuff
that
like
out.
that. So I think that's it.
Yeah, they can find me on YouTube. They just type my name in, Trevor Jaffe on YouTube.
Yeah.
We did a video after I tore my adductor and how
That's
fast
true.
it covered. That's a fun one. I got a lot of positive feedback on that.
Yeah.
That's so helpful.
Yeah, go check it out. Go back to my YouTube channel. You guys know where to go. All right, just type in Trevor and my name and you'll find it. All right, so that's the episode. See you again next time. Peace.